Welcome to the Body Ethos Podcast, where we're shifting the culture from sickness to health. Before we dive in, please remember that this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health routine. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Body Ethos Podcast, where we're all about shifting the culture from sickness to health. I'm your host, Jessica Whitmill, and today's topic is all about the journey from preconception to postpartum and the incredible role of a doula in this process. Our guest today is Noni Fisher. She is a passionate birth doula and a preconception to postpartum nutrition professional. She's also a friend and a former colleague of mine from the Nutritional Therapy Association, and I'm so excited to have her join us today. She's here to share about her expertise on how the right support during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum can positively impact your birth outcome for the mom and the baby. So today we're going to explore what doulas do, how they empower families, and the unique emotional, nutritional, and physical needs that mothers have during each stages of pregnancy. Plus, Noni is a new mom herself, so she'll be sharing her personal journey and how this experience has deepened her work. So let's get started. Noni, I'm so excited to have you on today.
Hi, Jess. It's so good to be here. I love everything that you're doing and so glad that the podcast is now part of your role. And just excited to have this conversation together.
Yeah, I am too. So I'd love for you to tell folks maybe a little bit about yourself and how you got into this work.
Yeah, absolutely. A little background on me. I know that you alluded to the NTA, and I think that's probably a similarity between the two of us and many others in this field is that nutrition was sort of where we started because of our own health issues. For me, it was years and years of chronic symptoms, really particularly in the women's health hormonal range, ranging from chronic headaches to mood swings and just general fatigue that I didn't even know that I had until I started training with the NTA. And really my curiosity was all about just like food and the local food movement at first. And then I became absolutely mind blown by the power of what very simple foundational diet and lifestyle changes can do. And sure enough, I started feeling better myself and was so passionate about starting to work with other women who had experienced the same sort of struggles. So after graduating as an FNTP, I began working with women and focused on a lot of those same issues, as I said, but then also kind of the more and more I was exposed to the field of women's health, I realized that this whole spectrum of like getting off of hormonal birth control, preconception, fertility, pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum is just this massive shift that happens in a woman's lifetime that is so unique. And I think as someone in my early 20s, I just was like ignorant and a little bit naive about like just how big of a role that can play in a woman's life, and her health can just be like massively changed, starting like moments after being pregnant, but then also like all the way through later, like 40s, 50s, and 60s. There are like ripple effects from how pregnancy went and how postpartum health was addressed. So that really just blew my mind, like realizing that I could maybe stay like in practice a little bit longer in this very small world of women's health of like pre-pregnancy and everything. But I was just so curious about childbirth. For years, I just like had the concept of a doula in the back of my mind. And I had this little voice, which I didn't even pay attention to for a long time, just being like, oh, I would be good at that. Like, I think that I could do that. And I finally let myself listen to that voice. So probably within like a year and a half after graduating from the NTA, I started training to become a birth doula. So the training for that is interesting. You like do a little workshop, and then for the next few years, I saw clients as a certifying doula. And then eventually that work is what you submit to become a certified doula. So I've been doing that for a handful of years, balancing both the nutrition work and the doula work, kind of going in ebbs and flows of which one I concentrate more on. But it's incredibly rewarding. I love it so much. And now that I've been through that transition myself, in the past a year and a half ago, I gave birth almost. And yeah, that's like emboldened me even more to really focus on this childbirth piece and postpartum, because yeah, studying it and like seeing it from a client's perspective is one thing, but then actually having the lived experience really, as we know, changes things. So I'm feeling like very passionate and so grateful to be able to do this work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love your passion for it and just your personal story and how you blend all of this together so beautifully because it is so needed. Like you understand all the different aspects of a woman's health journey
Yeah.
and how it impacts not just like in a silo, right? It's not just preconception. It's not just birth. It's not just postpartum. It's not just fertility, not just hormones. I don't know. I love how you just holistically blend everything together with nutrition as well. So you talked about becoming a doula and how that is a huge part of your work with clients. Can you explain what a doula is and what its role is in the birth process? And also, how might that support differ than something like a midwife or an OBGYN?
Yeah, absolutely. So very common thing to kind of to clarify with lay people and clients. I am not a medical provider as a doula. So a midwife or an OB, those are the kind of medical providers that we hear about doing blood pressure checks and checking your cervix and, you know, prescribing medications and monitoring diagnoses. You know, delivering babies, so to speak, even though that verbiage is not my favorite. They're the people that are delivering the babies. I am there really as attending in a supportive role and not in a medical role. While I do for sure like attend births in hospital settings, I am not medical in that sense. Doulas offer emotional, physical, mental support during labor. And that's kind of like the key climax of my work as a doula, but also like people hire me during pregnancy, sometimes as early as the first trimester. They know that they want something different from how their first birth went, and they just want to go ahead and get connected to a doula. So really, from the moment that I'm hired, I'm there supporting both the birthing person and their partner in that case to support them to have a healthy, empowered, informed pregnancy, making sure they know what their preferences and needs are for birth, attending the birth in person, whether that's in a hospital, a birth center, a home birth. I'm there with them. And then I also include like a postpartum visit about 10 days after they give birth. So it is very much a full spectrum approach. I'm doing a lot of different things. Like sometimes I'm attending the birth and I'm doing hands-on work with the client. And then other times I'm just like scheduling calls with them during pregnancy just to see how they're doing and talk about what their options are and helping them be a soundboard after a hard prenatal meeting that they might have had. There's a wide range in the role of a doula. I think that one big thing that, I know this wasn't what you specifically asked about, but in terms of misconceptions about doula, one thing that I love to make a note of is that I really am there for the partner too, which is just such an underrated aspect of what a doula is trained to do. And partners need so much support during that time. Like it is so much to put the pressure on a partner to be the doula in that experience. They have their own needs and their own stresses too. So it's so nice that in that role, I can like kind of switch gears for a little bit and like look at the husband and be like, hey, how are you doing? How can I support you? Or like normalize something that's going on. Like it is scary to see your partner sometimes go through childbirth. So not scary sometimes. It usually is pretty stressful, even if you trust that the right thing is happening. That's a lot to experience. So I love being able to kind of, that's the one time in my work doing nutrition and doula work that I can like help more than just the birthing person. And it's nice to like support and hold that family in that way.
Yeah, I love that. That was a great explanation. I'd love for you to talk about too, maybe just like if someone came to you and said, you know, hey, I want to have a birth in a hospital or a home birth, like, would you help them put together a plan? Would you help get them connected to the right people in the community? Maybe go a little bit into deeper of what that work looks like, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of resources in the community, that's a huge one. Like being able to send over like PDF guides of vested recommendations that I can make personally because I know all of the other practitioners in the area that I've wanted to connect with and be able to recommend with confidence. So usually from the time that a client hires me, I send them over like my trusted local here in Athens, Georgia, my trusted local Athens resources for birth, for like preparing for pregnancy, for postpartum. So that could range from like a chiropractor who specializes in working with pregnant women, or an acupuncturist that I recommend, or mental health professionals that specialize in that. Like the Georgia chapter for ICAN is this support group, or not support group, but nonprofit called, stands for International Cesarean Awareness Network. It's a mouthful, but it helps women who are trying to prevent maybe another subsequent cesarean after their first was. So lots of resources like that. Mainly it's in person because that's when it's so nice to be able to say that I can like personally recommend someone that I've met and had a discussion with. And then in terms of like preparing for birth and making an actual birth plan, that's something that usually happens when I'm sitting down with them, like in their home. It's so nice to be able to go and just like have a long form conversation about what their needs are. There is a stereotype that usually, maybe not a stereotype, but an assumption that someone hires a birth doula because they want a strictly natural or unmedicated birth, which usually that is the case in the clients that I've supported. But I've also supported clients who have a planned C-section or like planning to go to the hospital and have an epidural. And that is absolutely okay. And there are plenty of things that go into a birth plan besides just avoiding medication. So a lot of times it's something like, I get overstimulated easily. I would love it if the lights are kept dim. Like things that are so small like that really can make a big difference in this unique setting of going through childbirth. So walking through that, making sure if there's any, like once I get to know a client's anxieties and concerns about how birth might go, oftentimes that's an opportunity to sort of shift the language and put that into a preferences for a birth plan for them. So like if they're really nervous about understanding when to go to the hospital when they're having labor contractions, that's a huge thing that clients worry about. They just like don't know how to time that. They don't know if they're being silly by staying at home too long. So that's something where I can say, okay, let's plan for me to come over and I can help you guys navigate that time and help you guys make a decision about when we should get in the car and go to the hospital. So that's not necessarily something that they're putting in a document to share with their provider per se, but a lot of those things of just like getting on the whole team, the whole birth team on the same page of like best case scenario in order to make you feel supported in all of these ways. This is our general plan. And that's really like the biggest thing that I think doulas do in preparing for during the pregnancy stage of my support is just like making sure I'm meeting their needs and deliver on those requests, to just help them feel like safe and held in that way.
Yeah, I love that. I can think of so many people who haven't had a plan, right? And so then you have so many of your own anxieties or questions, right? And there's not maybe someone to reach out to. Maybe you don't have family that's close. Maybe, or you've not had a sister or an aunt or a mom that's, gone through this, or you're choosing a different path that may be unknown to your family, like a more natural birth. But I think that's so true. I mean, so many people have those types of anxieties or overstimulation or mental health concerns already, but then they're pregnant and those fears and things are exacerbated in that very pressured moment. So I love that you can support them even with like making sure the lights are dimmed down or keeping certain people out of the room or, things like that. So I think those are small things that make a huge difference in the outcome of the whole experience. So
yeah,
it keeps stress down. So I would love for you to talk about the impact of doulas on birth outcomes. So does having a doula positively impact the birth experience? I think we know the answer to that, but I'd love for you to talk about kind of that and then also outcomes for both, like you said, mom, baby, but even, partner and the whole family and the experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So yeah, this is something that I lead with a lot, especially in the interviews that I have with clients before we decide whether or not we're a good fit for each other. The agency is called DONA, who I certified through. They make a great sort of like evidence-based guide to what the data shows about how wonderful it is to have a birth doula support person. So, there's like the clinical benefits range, like in the data, it shows everything from like a reduced need for induction medication, a reduced, like less likelihood of having forceps or vacuum assisted birth, reduced likelihood of a cesarean birth if it's unplanned, better APGAR scores. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that phrasing, but it's essentially like a measurement that's taken at birth and then like a few minutes after birth and then a few minutes after that. So like within the first 15 minutes of the baby being born, there's these certain scores for how well they're doing and adjusting to being earthside. So one of data from that is like improved scores for the baby just within the first 10 minutes of birth. Also, generally, just like the data is showing a greater satisfaction and more positive outlook on the birth experience. And then in terms of emotional support, for sure, improved postpartum mental health, decreased anxiety, increased confidence, boosted self-esteem, increased, so like physical support of like the lactation support and all of these like smaller things in terms of like the secondhand ripples of what the childbirth experience was like. That's also included in the data. The big thing that like is a little bit harder to quantify in the research right now, but that I think is the most important takeaway is this general sense of like a more positive outlook and a more sense of confidence and satisfaction with the birth, which like is an indirect way of saying perhaps a decreased likelihood of some sort of trauma, whether that's like lowercase t trauma or capital T trauma. And I think that's for the partner as well, that like the secondhand trauma of seeing like a really medically scary event is should not be understated. So I think that that's something that like I just think that is kind of the biggest takeaway, that like women deserve to have a positive experience in birth. And if there's one thing that I want to happen, it's to feel like for women to feel informed and empowered and satisfied with how their birth went. And that could be that it was like a fully medicalized birth, like it doesn't mean that that was like a natural birth in a backyard. It could be that it was an epidural birth and then it led to a C-section. But if they felt like heard and supported during that whole thing by having a doula there to like help them have a conversation and know that like the intervention was happening for the right reason, that's what I think, like, that's when I know I'm doing my job. If someone just feels like happy with how it went, despite how it went, if that makes sense. That's the one I would prioritize most.
Yeah, absolutely. It's those intangibles, right? It's it's this kind of the overall feeling of them feeling empowered throughout the experience instead of kind of pushed around or confused or scared, right? You're there to help make sure that they feel informed. It's that informed consent. It's the involvement in the process and making sure they feel really confident in the decisions they're making and their partner too. And I think it's so true. Like you can't measure like the big T trauma or the little T trauma, but as you said, there's better mental health outcomes, and postpartum depression is so prevalent these days. And I wonder if having someone like you by their side could maybe make that whole process a little bit easier, right? Because that dissatisfaction with that process can leave a lot of regret and guilt and shame, even, I think, with a lot of new moms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that was awesome. So, okay, now switching hats. Okay, so we talked about doula stuff. I love to talk a little bit about nutrition. So, as a nutrition professional, and Noni said too, so you're a functional nutritional therapy practitioner as well. So, what are some of the most important dietary considerations for preconception, pregnancy, and what are some common misconceptions about pregnancy nutrition as well?
Great questions. I feel like on this one also, please feel free to chime in at any point, because even if it's not like your specialty, I feel like you still work with a lot of women in this niche. But I feel like we will have a similar thoughts on our approach with this, because it is so, I'm kind of like stuck between these two worlds on this topic, because it is so essential for women to learn like just how vital it is to have folate and just how important vitamin D is and like your mineral levels. And yes, those are key. And they're, oftentimes prenatal vitamins, prenatal supplements just simply do not have enough of those nutrients to help to support a healthy pregnancy. But I will say that I feel like part of the training that you and I received and just my general practice working one-on-one with women is that like it's just doing such a disservice if you go straight into that nitty-gritty, like fine-tuned hyper specific examples of nutrition during this time, because for the most part, like when I look back at protocols that I made for women who are specifically trying to support the preconception and pregnancy phases, and the most common recommendations I'm making are like, hey girl, let's get you eating 3 meals a day. So you can have like the coolest supplement that's like sponsored by the greatest influencers that has all the right forums of all the right nutrients. But like, let's just work on your mindset too. And let's work on like knowing when your hunger cues are telling you to eat and like what it feels like to go to sleep at night feeling good in your body and waking up in the morning feeling good in your body. Because it's going to take a lot of like choline in your supplements to make that shift. Whereas like foundational, the boring things that no one wants to talk about in a podcast, that person. But I really have, like, that's been a hard one for me because I am a nutrition practitioner. So I can get in the weeds of like all those micronutrients and how it's crazy that they're not in enough foods and under discussed, and that's so real. But I feel like it's like far and away the most essential things for preconception. I'll say like the caveat is that pregnancy is tricky because oftentimes people feel quite ill. So I think like a lot of the same nutrients that are so important for preconception are also essential for pregnancy too. But I will say like preconception is this wonderful time where your body is yours in that moment. And you don't have to navigate like aversions and cravings and really low energy and sickness. So that's just such a great way. Like before I'd recommend anything about these specific nutrients and supplements, I would say, make sure you're eating 3 meals a day. Make sure you shift your mindset from like, kind of like empty snacking, mindless snacking, to actually having like a mini meal during the day if you feel like that's something that you need. Prioritizing slow cooked meats and like warm, easy to digest vegetables, restorative rest, getting closer to 10 hours of sleep at night. What? I mean, like it's very common, I feel, for people to say, oh, they say 7 to 9 is ideal. So, or like, 8 is ideal. So I'll settle for 7. But research now, women of childbearing age need closer to 10, which means let's not settle for 8.5. Let's get closer to 10. So that's really where I start, which might be boring, but that's where the magic happens in my experience in working with clients. And then after we talk about that, that's when I love to talk about like, wow, protein is so essential for so many reasons, because it turns out that protein is the literal building blocks for human life, and every single cell has amino acids, and we have to get that from protein that's easy to digest and absorb and use. So yeah, that's where I can get into like, okay, let's get these numbers. Like, let's get close to 90 grams of protein a day. Vitamin B6, folate, choline, vitamin D. These are so essential. And a common theme with that is that they're often found in the most nutrient dense foods, which usually is from animal products. And I completely get the hesitation and reservation about eating meat in this day and age. Like, factory farming is no joke. And also, the data shows that to support a healthy pregnancy and a healthy postpartum, we simply need more of those nutrients. So I have that conversation all day long. I think it's such an interesting one to dive into. But yeah, this thing is wild to me. Like, prenatal supplements that are on the market that are the most affordable are the ones that are the most lacking. So like, it is hard to find a prenatal out there with enough choline in it. And choline is absolutely vital for a baby's brain to develop properly in utero. It's so important for every single organ. Like we're building new organs inside of our body. So it's just such a critical time. I know I'm like nebulous in whether I'm referring to preconception or pregnancy, but it's essentially one and the same with a lot of these nutrients. They're equally important. Like, the same thing that choline is found so readily in eggs, which and it's wonderful in the preconception phase because you're literally supporting your egg quality with choline in eggs. But that same concept can be applied to pregnancy too. So like the same thing that supports a healthy egg is also going to be helping the fetus develop properly. So B vitamins, all of these nutrients that I'm referencing right now are critical. Then there's also things that can really, like when you're fine tuning preconception and fertility, like CoQ10 is a molecule that's incredibly important for healthy cell development and mitochondria, antioxidant support. N-acetylcysteine is wonderful. Those are some of the ones that I can kind of like when I'm having trouble with a client who has been doing the things and is eating 3 meals a day and doing the great kind of baseline supplementation, but where there's still some tweaks to be had, that's a great place to start. Those are the big ones that jump out at me, but I'm curious if you have other thoughts about certain things during preconception or for pregnancy that you might have on your mind.
No, I mean, I think you said it so well. Like it's those foundations of like just making sure you're eating enough food, you're resting, you're hydrating properly. I know regulating your blood sugar comes into this picture a lot for women too. But again, like that's addressed when we're eating those nutrient dense foods 3 times a day and we're resting and we're not stressing out the body, right? Like blood sugar is naturally going to come into balance, but it is something that, like you kind of said, like that would maybe the only other thing I would bring up is blood sugar.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's huge too. In the case of pregnancy with gestational diabetes, that's kind of a whole different conversation. But I think like blood sugar and minerals are some big ones that are often overlooked. Minerals specifically in the postpartum stage, which we'll get to in a second. I think too, the thing about protein becomes like tenfold that much more important during the pregnancy stage. The studies are now showing that I believe it's like the second half of pregnancy all the way through the first 6 months of postpartum, a woman's needs for protein are higher than that of a professional athlete. So that's just wild, which really like closer to 100 grams of protein a day. Sorry that it keeps scratching my eye. There's something in there. Anyway.
No worries.
But yeah, that's where it becomes something that's like a little bit more of it can be a hurdle to get to that number of that many grams of protein during pregnancy, especially in first trimester when more people are feeling ill. But if they need motivation, at least from anecdotal personal experience, and there is some data showing that increased protein can help reduce the morning sickness symptoms. Although as soon as I say that, I do want to caveat that like another thing that we know is effective in that is proper sperm health. So that is something that usually when I start talking about preconception and pregnancy nutrition, I make the big announcement that like I'm specifically talking about female hormone, like preconception and pregnancy through the female lens right now. But I want to also yell it from a mountaintop that sperm health is being overlooked in really concerning ways right now.
Yes.
Topic for a different day. But yeah, I mean, there are studies that show that like even like the childbirth outcomes for a woman can be traced back to sperm health. So all of those same nutrients that support healthy eggs and healthy ovulation and healthy periods and therefore healthy pregnancy are also wonderful for sperm health. Antioxidants are incredibly important for sperm as well. Minerals, zinc, incredibly important. But I know that's a side conversation, but I can't help but to go down that rabbit hole as well.
No, I know. I'm going to have to do another like podcast on that topic because, you see the stats too of like, just even like miscarriages are a lot of the times actually contributed back to the sperm health. And there's so many women who are seeing their doula and their nutritionist and they're doing the work, but I'm not going to dog on men on this, but they are not always doing the work as intently, even though they're 50-50 of the whole picture.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that is. Well, actually, I'm so glad you mentioned that because this is reminding me that really my intention in sharing that is not about like sounding the alarm bells about sperm health necessarily, but more like, oof, us women are dealing with a lot of stress and we're putting a lot on our plates. And there's so much guilt and honestly, like trauma that happens when someone is unable to have a healthy pregnancy.
Yeah.
Not even healthy pregnancy, but unable to conceive and or unable to keep that pregnancy. And I mean, this is pretty new for people to be having a conversation about how the male's health could be playing a role. And I'm going to take that as an opportunity to help women like let go of some of that pain because that's a lot to carry and we don't have to carry all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Amen to that. I couldn't say it better myself. Yeah, that's so good. Well, we'll definitely have to do another podcast on that at some point, or maybe do like a little panel
Yeah,
discussion with some
like
other
round
folks
table
who.
discussion, and then someone can start talking over me when I've said too much.
No, I think that was perfect. And I think too, it just comes into like being a practitioner. I think that's a sign that you're a good practitioner. And I know I try to do the same is like just holding that space that it's not all on you. You're doing the best you can. And there's sometimes outside influences, like you said, that are impacting this and to let go of that shame, that guilt, and just knowing that you are doing the best you can in this situation. So, yeah, so beautiful. So, let's talk about postpartum though. I think that the postpartum period is often overlooked. And so, what are some key ways that people can support their healing, nourish their body, support their baby's nutrition through breastfeeding, and just support their overall wellness during this time?
Absolutely. So this is where I think that 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I would have said something a little different than what I would say now, which is that I can't help but think of my own personal experience during this time. And as a nutrition professional and as a birth doula myself, woo, let me tell you, like postpartum, I've heard this that like, oh, we prepare for fertility and prepare for pregnancy and childbirth in all these ways. Like I had a plan and a PDF guide to every moment of my experience up until, like uh, an hour after my baby was born. And then my baby was born. And I think that when it comes to like sharing thoughts and wisdom about supporting a woman during this time, there's a few things that come to my brain before I go into nutrition because just general wellness is so vulnerable during this time. And this is when I think it's just absolutely essential to take or like use the investment into local resources to make sure that you know who is going to support you in which ways before the baby is born. So this could be, when I say investment, I mean like investment of time and energy and money, not just like buying
Mm-hmm.
things, but like who is going to be bringing you food? What is like, is your partner going to take as much time as humanly possible off of work? Which sometimes that's like unavoidable and you can't do anything, but like making sure you have as much of a village and community as possible, because it going from 0 to 1, I will say, like, I think is usually the hardest transition for most people. And it's, I think now from my perspective, like as a doula supporting other clients again, now that I've become a mom, this is where I'm really going to be like, okay, let's invest in those resources. You need to have your mental health professional already called and like scheduled a time with them before the baby is born. Also, just like understanding how visceral it's going to be when the baby is born. There's kind of like nothing, this is sort of transitioning into me like spewing from my own personal experience. But I feel
Yeah.
like it's interesting because I'm like now so tempted to try to make someone understand just how wild it is to become a mom. Like that first month is just insane. And it's sort of like these two truths are true at the same time. Number one, you literally cannot prepare. But number two, I feel like it's so important to have conversations with other moms who can like be real and candid and support you and hold you in whatever experience you're having, because the hormones of like shifting into postpartum, your body is doing insane things. Like the energy demands on a body for breastfeeding are more than pregnancy. It's like your body is just changing at this wild pace, and the hormones, and you're taking care of a child, and you're not sleeping for most people. I don't want to make generalizations too much, but that's where I'm like, oh, you got to give yourself so much space and so many resources and really like force yourself to build a village if there isn't one, because that's going to be where like your mental health and your marriage health starts to suffer so much that it will spill over into the like physical health and the kind of context of what you and I do as practitioners. So that's where I then get into like, okay, meals are so important in postpartum. It's oftentimes like pretty hard to move. So you have to have meals planned, like meals cooked in the freezer so that you can just put them on the stove and then put them in the bowl and have someone bring them to you. It becomes like, I keep being tempted to use this word visceral, but it really is like you zoom in into this micro world where like, if your water bottle with the element in it is not, if it's 3 feet away, you literally might not be able to get it. Like you can't, your core muscles are gone. So it's not just like, stay hydrated and get those good soups in. It's like, who's going to bring it to you? And is there a table next to your bed that's within arm's reach? And do you have something to hold your baby up on your lap while you're nursing so that you can do that without hands for 1 minute so that you can reach both of your arms over and grab soup and eat it? And I know that this sounds like so weird, like I'm just going into this so much detail for no reason, but this is the thing that blew my mind when my baby was born, that I hated, that in the hundreds of hours of podcasts I listened to, all the books I read, like this was my field. And I never heard someone talk about just how much of like a catastrophe that whole experience is, in such a beautiful way too. I don't just mean that in a pejorative way, but preparing for that time is so incredibly different than preparing for a healthy fertility and pregnancy journey, because you're like you're a different person during that time, and postpartum is just so raw and vulnerable. And I also am aware that I'm like putting extra drama on it because that was my experience. And some people really do have an easy shift into postpartum. And I trust that with my subsequent children, it might be a little bit lighter of an experience for me because it won't be so new. I think the newness of it is something that's incredibly hard as well. So yeah, that's my 5-minute long intro to that question. And now for the actual question, which is like the literal things and literal nutrients that are so important. It's a lot of the incredibly easy to digest meats and vegetables that I was referencing earlier that are so great for preconception too. Like collagen and glycine and choline are really wonderful for supporting healing. So like there's a lot of musculature that needs to come back together. Collagen is incredibly helpful for that. So that's why bone broth is a staple of postpartum cuisine in the countries that really do honor it through their tradition in a way that's a little bit lost here in the States. Bone broth is essential, like stews using bone broth, soups, anything in a slow cooker is wonderful because it's also so easy. Like put chicken thighs and a can of coconut milk in a slow cooker with some spices, and that's a wonderful meal several hours later. So the slow cooked meats is a huge one to support healing. Also because protein needs continue to be really high. Also because your digestion is quite messed up usually after pregnancy and childbirth. Like your organs are literally shifting. So it's a little bit harder to have a smooth digestion. So I think that's when like easy to digest warm foods is key. And then I would say proper hydration with minerals. This is like the most critical time for minerals in my experience, like professionally working with clients during this time. It's really easy to get some pretty exaggerated mineral loss in that first month, especially if you're choosing to breastfeed. It does take nutrients from your body if you're not having enough. So this, like, supporting yourself with trying to prevent like mental health struggles in all the ways that I already have mentioned is one thing, but also like it's hard to stay healthy and feel resilient when there is nutrition being pulled out of your own body in order to keep your baby alive and thriving, which is so beautiful that we're designed that way, but it's really hard. And I was shocked just by how much I had to eat so that I didn't feel lightheaded, so that I didn't feel incredibly depressive, to be honest. Like that was, that's someone coming from me who, like, not only do I have the training as a nutrition professional, but I also have a large appetite. Like I'm pretty good at staying on top of those things usually. And so I can't help but think like, wow, if I really struggled in that way and I was doing those things, it must be pretty common for people to be underfed and undernourished and quite depleted physically.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, all that was so beautifully said. I think that's why I love you as a person and love what you're doing. Cause I think like the rawness of like, hey, like I actually listened to hundreds of hours of podcasts, but nobody said like the nitty gritty things that like really it looks like in postpartum and the support that you need and kind of the things that you wish you had planned for. So thank you for sharing all that. Like I was like, yeah, I would have never thought about any of that. Like just all the little things and how all that makes a huge difference in the experience. So yeah. It's so beautiful. Okay. So you talked a little bit about like your experience, but I would love if you want to share a little bit more about your personal experience becoming a mom yourself, and how that shaped your approach as a doula and a nutrition professional.
Yeah, I would like to act as though I had not referenced my personal experience yet in this conversation, but I know I have. And I know that I've recently just touched on a lot of those aspects of like how it's shifted my approach. But I think that like the biggest takeaway is that it's something where like life has so much more color and like texture to it now that I'm a parent. And I've tried so hard to try to come up with the words to explain it. And I think that it's evidence in me like stumbling through all of this right now because it's like when I was referencing like that full catastrophe, I found that in a wonderful book. I'll make sure you can put it in the show notes or something. I can't remember right now, but she's wonderful. And she talked about like how pivotal that was to her sort of transition into being a parent, a mother specifically, that like the full catastrophe of becoming a mom means that, especially in those first few months, in every like moment to moment, you're experiencing so much grief and anguish, but then also so much love and joy that you've never been able to feel before. And that just recognizing that was a huge piece of like the healing for me of understanding what it meant to be a mother. It's also like an actual term. Like we think of like adolescence. We know what that word means. It's like going from like a youth, a child to an adult. There is a term for that for becoming a mom. It's called matrescence. Very underutilized word in my opinion, but that is like what this experience has been. There is terminology for that. There is like science to show, obviously on the like hormonal level, crazy things are happening in my body in the past year and a half. But just like spiritually, it's a transformation that I feel like I'd be remiss to not use in any of my work in the coming years because it's really just like completely shuffled the way that I think about what it means to like be healthy and what it means to be a practitioner. Because I think I just can't help but lean into more thoughts about like what are you doing in the sense of like gratitude, and even if you're not a religious person, like thinking about God and thinking about this spiritual insanity of what it means to be a parent. And I feel like we're supposed to think about that. And it could be in any context that resonates with you. So it doesn't have to be about religion, but I feel like it feels like a lot because it is, and it's supposed to be kind of like earth shattering in that way. Is that even close to being an answer?
I think so. I think that was amazing.
I suppose that like bringing it home to specifically as a nutrition practitioner and a doula, I think it's more about like prioritizing community and like resilience and overall like foundational health, which I'm so grateful that I know that you would agree that our nutrition training really did focus on the foundations. But I now think that I'm coming out of having this shift, and I understand what it actually means to be like foundationally healthy as a parent and as like a mom post childbirth too. So I'm like balancing these two worlds where all I want to talk about is just like the foundations of what it means to be existing as a woman, like post birth. And I think that just means like allowing for more time in my one-on-one work with clients to really like meet them where they're at and talk about community and talk about why the village is so important in those ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So beautifully said. Just all of it, just that wrapped it up so beautifully. Thank you so much. That was so amazing. I was finding myself just kind of getting lost in everything you were saying. So I hope everyone who's listening to this also feels the same way. I feel like we should definitely have you come back, just kind of dig deeper into some of these topics too. So, because it was so awesome. Thank you so much, Noni. Yeah. So I always close with one final question. As you know, the Body Ethos podcast is all about helping people take meaningful shifts every day, even foundational steps, as we can say, to shift their lives and ultimately shift our culture from sickness to health. What is one practical or even impactful way that someone listening today can start making that shift right now?
I'm going to say two things because I'm cheating and expanding on every single question that you ask, because
That's perfect.
apologies. I'm going to say it in the context of being in nutrition, working with women. Far and away, most common recommendation that I make with women is eat enough. Like, make sure you're eating enough. Simple as that. I think that's a key aspect that is just so missing in the world of functional health. Eat enough. And then in terms of like the spiritual practice of becoming a mom and preparing for this whole journey from preconception through postpartum, I would say to have a gratitude practice, because it is needed to have something to like come back to feel grounded and realize how much joy is around us.
So beautiful. Two fantastic recommendations. Thank you so much, Noni. Well, thank you again. It was so great to see you too, by the way. This was so great. I'm just so blessed by knowing you and knowing the work that you do. I know you're helping so many people in your community and beyond. So thank you, everybody, for joining us at the Body Ethos podcast today. I hope the conversation with Noni just deepened your understanding of the pregnancy and birth journey and empowered you to take meaningful action steps towards creating a healthier, more supportive experience for yourself or with those you support through the birth process and with women's hormones and fertility and postpartum support. If this episode resonated with you, please don't keep it to yourself. So subscribe, leave a review, share it with somebody who is ready to shift their health journey or might be preparing for this journey into motherhood. And for more resources, updates, and ways to connect with either myself or Noni, please check out the show notes. And remember, true healing happens when we get to the root of the issue. And I think too, when we connect with our community and the wisdom of our mind, body, and spirit. So until next time, I hope you all keep shifting the culture from sickness to health. Have a great day.